as well as military devices for night vision and aerial reconnaissance. Join us for nonfiction books on TV, Book TV on C-SPAN 2. If you'd like to watch Book TV, call your local cable operator and say you want C-SPAN 2.
Now from Belgrade, coverage of Day 50 of the NATO airstrikes on Yugoslavia from state-controlled Serbian television. This newscast was recorded today at 1:30 p.m. Eastern and translated at C-SPAN here in Washington. It's about a half hour.
You're watching the primetime news of Radio Television Serbia. Respected viewers, the President of the Federal Republic of Yugoslavia and the Supreme Commander Slobodan Milošević, on the occasion of the Day of Security, the 13th of May, sent his greetings to the security forces of Yugoslavia. The greeting states, on the occasion of the 13th of May, Day of Security, I wish to greet all security forces and police forces and commend them on their contribution to the defense of our fatherland. In your destruction of the terrorist movement in Kosovo and its gangs supported by foreign powers who have committed evil aggression against our country, you were very successful. This struggle took the lives of many members of our security forces, whose sacrifice is a shining example of your courage and dedication. With your patriotism, courage and skill, you prevented the actions of the enemy and thus their efforts to undermine our defense forces. By wishing you well on this day, I'm convinced that you shall continue to carry out all your duties in the defense of the sovereignty, territorial integrity, freedom, and the constituent order of our country. The President of the Federal Republic of Yugoslavia, Slobodan Milošević, passed a decree on the occasion of the 13th of May, Day of Security, for members of our security forces, for their courage, successful command, disciplined and responsible conduct during their operations, which set a personal example for the other police forces. Distinctions were bestowed upon. Order of Courage for Captain Radenović Veljko, Captain Višnjić Siniša, Sergeant Nikšević Radojica, Sergeant Vasić Branko. Order for Merit in the area of defense of the first degree was bestowed upon Major Arizanović Dragan, Major Adžemović Boško, Major Lečić Milan, Sergeant Vuković Miroljub, Sergeant Jovanović Zvezdan. The Order of Merit in the area of defense and security for second degree was bestowed upon Captain Tomić Mileta, Sergeant Marković Tomislav, Sergeant Mojsilović Stale, Younger Sergeant Pačkić Predrag, Corporal Marković Bojan, Administrative Officer Zarić Slobodan, Corporal Pantelić Dragoljub, Cvetković Ljubiša, Putnik Drago, and Miletić Dejan. Order of Merit in the area of defense and security of the third degree was bestowed upon Corporal Pavković Zoran, Pajić Sreten, Corporal First Class Vučićević Goran. Medal of Merit in the area of defense was given to Sergeant Pavić Vojislav and Sergeant Simović Nenad. Medal for special distinction in the area of defense was given to Corporal Rajković Milan, Pušičić Zoran, Dević Jovica, Todorović Ljubinko, Minić Aleksandar, and Nikolić Alexander. The President of the Republic of Serbia, Milan Milutinović, on the occasion of the 13th of May, Day of Security, received a delegation of the Ministry of Internal Affairs, headed by Vlajko Stojiljković. Congratulating to our security forces on their holiday, President Milutinović gave them their well-deserved credit for their defense of the constitutional order, territorial integrity, for their brave fight against the terrorists in Kosovo, and for securing peace and stability for civilians throughout Serbia. The work and professional conduct of our police forces deserves the respect of all of our citizens. They fulfilled their professional duties in the best possible way. From the beginning of this aggression of NATO, members of the security forces have shown great selflessness and engagement to adapt themselves to the new conditions so that they can fully accomplish all of their tasks. This was confirmed by their great patriotism, dedication, and high morale, for which they deserve a true recognition. President Milutinovic expressed his satisfaction with the fact that the state of Serbia has highly professional security forces today that are the best guarantee for a competent, professional and legal accomplishment of even the highest security tasks for the good of all citizens of Serbia in these very difficult conditions, stated President Milutinovic. The Ministry of Internal Affairs continued to accomplish all of its tasks, even beyond what is defined by the law, especially in the fight against crime and all illegal activities regarding the production and the sale of goods for the retail market, medicine, fuel, in their facilitation of traffic and reinforcement of state borders. The great selflessness and dedication was also shown by firefighting teams in rescuing people and their property. President Milutinovic once again reiterated that the citizens of Serbia demand an immediate end of the bombing and the aggression of the NATO countries. We always sought and will seek political solution and peace, continuation of direct dialogue with representatives of the political parties of Kosovo Albanians, with full respect for the equality of all people and ethnic communities in Kosovo. At the end, President Milutinovic expressed his conviction that all members of the police will continue to professionally and efficiently, as well as legally, carry out all of their tasks in terms of the protection of the constitutional order of Yugoslavia and strengthening of Serbia, as well as securing peace and stability for all of the citizens. On the occasion of the 13th of May, the day of the security, President of Serbia Milan Milutinovic issued a decree to promote Major General Lukic, head of the police headquarters in Pristina, into the rank of Lieutenant General of Police. On the same occasion, the Minister of the Police of Serbia, Vlajko Stoljković, promoted 72 police officers and 307 younger officers. For example, 1 to the level of colonel, 10 to the rank of major, 12 to the rank of captain, 18 to the rank of sergeant, 17 to the rank of younger sergeants, 10 to the rank of corporals, 3 to the rank of Master Sergeant First Class, 58 to the rank of Master Sergeant, 126 other officers, and 82 other younger officers of the police. The Federal Minister of Defense, Pavle Bulatović, held a reception on the occasion of the 13th of May for the head officials of the Ministry of Defense, headed by Lieutenant General Geza Farkas and Major General Branko Krga. The message to the members of the security forces within the armed forces of Yugoslavia and to the Federal Ministry of Defense states: in this year in which we mark 55th anniversary of the successful work of our security forces, our fatherland is exposed to a most brutal aggression of the NATO alliance, headed by the USA, as well as by aggression from the Albanian terrorism. Thanks to the unity of the people and the state leadership, as well as our conviction to defend our freedom and independence, the aggressor has suffered serious losses, and we have managed to keep our combat readiness and the vital interests of our country. On this historical task, special contribution has been made by the members of military police within the armed forces of Yugoslavia. Some of them offer their lives at the altar of freedom. I wish you a happy holiday with the message that the citizens of Yugoslavia and the members of the army expect from all of you in the upcoming period of struggle for wisdom over war, to give your fullest contribution to the defense of the country and the army of Yugoslavia from all kinds of security threats. The commander of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Dragoljub Ojdanić, also received a delegation of the intelligence forces of the defense, headed by Lieutenant Colonel Geza Farkas and Major General Branko Krga, to wish them well on their holiday. The greeting message of Lieutenant General Dragoljub Ojdanić states, "At a time when our country is a victim of unprecedented evil aggression of NATO, which joined by other subversive and terrorist forces wants to occupy us, the army of Yugoslavia is supported by its people and shows a heroic struggle to a much stronger enemy. The full contribution to this struggle is given by the military police and security forces with their responsible and highly professional work on the defense from intelligence and other terrorist operations. In carrying out their assignments, a part of these forces have lost their lives, but their deed will be a shining example of courage, patriotism and dedication to the fatherland. With our most sincere wishes to celebrate the next holiday in freedom, I recognize your courageous struggle so far, convinced that you will continue to carry out the defensive tasks towards the fatherland just as well in the future." The criminal NATO alliance throughout the day and last night attacked civilian targets throughout Serbia. On a purely residential eastern area of Niš, NATO criminals dropped many cluster bombs, causing a lot of civilian damage. Several missiles hit the grammar school near Lipljan in Kosovo, as well as the grammar school in Leposavljević. No casualties, but great material damage. They bombed refugee settlements near Podujevo and Paraćin, and they also attacked Kosovska Mitrovica, Pirot and Pristina. 10 loads of cluster bombs were dropped by the NATO criminals on the largest residential area of Niš, Boulevard of Lenin, in an attack that began at 2:55 and lasted for half an hour. 3 loads of cluster bombs, a total of 1,300 bombs, were dispersed over a large area of apartment buildings and family houses of several thousand Niš citizens. 11 citizens are injured, 3 of them critically. Firefighters worked on about 10 locations. Because of the large number of unexploded cluster bombs, one of which fell in front of the medical center, the traffic has been stopped along numerous city streets, and the citizens are urged not to leave their apartments. In one of the 5 repeated attacks, 20 missiles hit the northwestern zone of Niš. They hit the production plant for machines, a tobacco factory under construction, Xerox, Elektrotehna, and nearby neighborhoods Komren and Medoševac. Our anti-aircraft units had a counterattack in order to prevent the catastrophic outcome for the many civilians who were in the streets around 3 p.m. This was the 23rd series of attacks on Niš. Over the 10 days, 20 people have been killed, young people, women and older children, older people. As we learn, at the same time, Niš was visited by the great human rights champion Mary Robertson, but left it immediately. We feel that she could close her eyes before this grave violation of human rights, primarily the right to life. For the first time from the beginning of the aggression against our country, at 2:57 p.m. there was a new criminal attack on the area of Pirot. Despite our anti-aircraft units, NATO aggressor managed to send 5 missiles, primarily towards civilian targets. As we learned from the local Center for Civil Defense, 2 missiles were directed towards the village of Izvor. Aside from material damage and the temporary shut-off from electric power due to the damage to the relay station, there are no other damages. 2 missiles during this attack were sent towards the village of Držina and 1 close to the village of Srečkovac. For a second time, they targeted the TV tower on Kozarica, but without success. The target of the NATO aggressors was once again the Šumadija village of Leskovac, around 1:20 p.m., NATO criminals hit this village with 5 missiles. They injured 5 people and caused a lot of material damage. At the same time, there was one more missile towards the nearby village of Konjuša. There were no injuries, but there was a considerable material damage. Even on this 50th day of the aggression from NATO against Yugoslavia, we see bombs close to Kraljevo. From about 1 o'clock to about 1:45 p.m., the Kraljevo area was a site of a fierce battle between NATO aviation and the anti-aircraft units of Yugoslavia. During that time, the NATO bombarding planes managed to throw 4 air-to-ground missiles on the village of Lađevci. And afterwards, because of our anti-air defense, they had to flee the area. According to the information that we get, there were no injuries, but there has been new material damage for numerous civilian facilities. According to the intelligence center Vladičin Han, last night around 9:30, the evil airplanes hit the residential part of the town with 4 missiles to hit the bridge at the very center of town. The missiles hit the bridge at its very base and close to the cultural center at the moment when there were people in the streets. From the missiles of these NATO killers, 2 people were killed, 5 of them seriously injured, but they're not in life danger. The city has suffered huge material damage. Last night, around 10:50, the planes of the NATO aggressor attacked the overpass over the international railroad between Subotica and Segedin. This is part of the highway system E75 that connects Yugoslavia with Hungarian towns. It was open for traffic only 6 months ago with the completion of the last section from Rodino Gnezdo to the Hungarian border. About 50 houses close by have been damaged, but there are no human casualties. The highway, however, that's fairly close to the overpass, is open to traffic. This is the northernmost facility targeted since the beginning of the aggression because it's only 3 kilometers south of the checkpoint Horgoš along the Yugoslav-Hungarian border. That the terrorist strongholds are destroyed in Kosovo, especially in Drenica region, and that the terrorist army, the so-called KLA, has been disabled, shows the confiscated documentation of the 114th Terrorist Brigade headquartered in the village of Galica. The terrorists fled or have been liquidated. What we have are documents or blank application forms for joining the organization which, with crime and terrorism and held by the Unicum Party, dreamt of the creation of a greater Albania to unify all areas inhabited by ethnic Albanians. Who committed the greatest crimes in Kosovo is shown by the list of founders of this terrorist brigade, who asked all prospective terrorists for their biographies. We also have a list of people sending their financial assistance as well as medicine supplies, the list of distributed arms for killing civilians, and these photos of alleged civilians and children with arms show very clearly that these are not civilians, as the Western media try to show them, but hardened terrorists that abused children for their goals. Many of the terrorists from the list threw their arms and uniforms and tried to squeeze out of the country unpunished as civilians. The crimes of these terrorists were assisted by foreign mercenaries and instructors. This is a picture from the USA. The same terrorist with the insignia of the terrorist organization is here shown on the photograph at this now defunct headquarters. Aside from mercenaries from Germany, there were mujahedins, mercenaries from the Near East responsible for grave crimes against civilians in Kosovo. The arms, the documents, and the crime is everything that has been left behind this so-called KLA. Lieutenant General Milorad Obranović, commander of the Second Army, visited one of the units of the anti-aircraft. Major Jovan Krljelić, commander of the unit, pointed out that all of the soldiers are ready to continue defending their country. After the visit to the unit, General Obradović said that he was very satisfied with the full engagement of this army, especially in terms of their anti-aircraft defense systems. At the same time, he also told the soldiers what is the great responsibility they bear, but also the great confidence they enjoy among the other army ranks and the people as a whole. NATO alliance continued to hit civilian targets in the area of Kosovska Mitrovica. 3 missiles, once again, after many times, attacked the hill of Kutlovac near Stari Trg. The workers' neighborhood Stari Trg, 100% Albanian, was hit by 2 missiles. The Air Force of the NATO criminals hit with 2 missiles the bridge near Miloševo on the road to Kosovska Mitrovica. In the same area, they also hit the village of Babin Most. 1 explosion was heard near Gnjilane, Donje Grubče near Podujev, and 1 missile also fell close to Kosovska Kamenica. Last night, NATO planes attacked again and hit the building and the TV tower of Radio Television Serbia on Vršac Breg. All criminal attacks and destruction of NATO cannot destroy the unity of our people and their confidence in their leadership, noted the Vice President of the government and the Socialist Party, Zoran Lilić, during his visit to the Zlatibor area. The Vice President of the federal government and of the Socialist Party of Serbia, Zoran Lilić, visited Užice to see the consequences of the criminal bombardment by the NATO alliance. I had an opportunity to see for myself once again this shameful attack of NATO, and what kind of politics is this for international law, by attacking a very center of a town, destroying the post office in Užice, and they have violated all human rights that they're talking about, leaving 18,000 people without telephone lines, without their basic right to communicate with their friends, whether in the country or abroad. Zoran Lilić and Zoran Vujović, member of the Executive Party of the Socialist Party of Serbia, also attended the session of the Socialist Party of Serbia in the Zlatibor area. They talked about the economic and political situation in the county, as well as the measures for rehabilitation from the aggressor attacks in this area. The damage is huge. The aggressor has fully destroyed the post office in Užice, and 18,000 people have been left without telephone lines. They have destroyed many traffic infrastructural facilities. For example, 3 bridges are destroyed, medical centers are damaged, many village houses are damaged, as well as economic facilities. The air danger in this area is almost 24 hours a day. Despite everything, the spirit of the people and their perseverance has not been shaken. Despite the difficulty of finding fuel, all of the farming activities are proceeding according to the plan, and supply, given the infrastructural destruction, is still good. A delegation of Polish parliamentarians, headed by Izabela Sirekowska, met the Vice President of the Assembly of Serbia, Dr. Vladimir Štambok. During the discussion, both delegations noted that the evil aggression of NATO against Yugoslavia is one of the most severe violations against a sovereign state. It was noted that Yugoslavia and Serbia, headed by President Milošević, has done everything by political means and by full respect of all of the rights of the citizens to defend its peace, the security of the citizens, and the territorial integrity of the country as a whole. The Polish parliamentarians confirmed the categorical support for a political solution of the Kosovo crisis and expressed grave concern for what NATO forces have done to our people. The delegation also expressed strong disagreement with the Rambouillet documents because it was clearly against the principles of equality, sovereignty, and territorial integrity of Serbia, that is to say Yugoslavia. It was jointly reiterated that the bombing has to be stopped immediately because the aggression cannot lead to peace in the Balkans, but only to destabilization and widening of the war. And now to events around the world. President of Russia, Boris Yeltsin, recalled from office the government and the Prime Minister Primakov because of what he said, inadequate measures for stabilization of the economic situation in Russia. This decision met varied comments in Moscow. He also expressed dissatisfaction about NATO's disrespect for Russia's proposal. At the same time, German Chancellor Schröder made in Beijing a categorical demand for an immediate end of the criminal bombardment on Yugoslavia. China also doesn't accept NATO's explanation on the attack of the Chinese embassy in Belgrade and demands punishment for those responsible. Yeltsin stressed that the leaders of NATO react inadequately to all of the proposals that have been made by Russia regarding the regulation of the crisis. Today, therefore, he made a number of decrees and orders for the ministers of defense and foreign affairs. Russia is not going to resort to a role of technical messenger because it has its own interests in the Balkans, stated the head of the intelligence office, Vladimir Putin, interpreting the substance of Yeltsin's statement and the meetings at Kremlin today. He stressed that Russia is going to change its concept of national defense and accept the fact that Europe, majority of Europe, supports NATO, which also brings about new tasks for the defense of Russia. The head of Russian diplomacy, Igor Ivanov, stated after the Security Council meeting that Russia supports active diplomatic efforts, but at the same time, it abhors and is really concerned by the latest bombardments that seriously hinder diplomatic solution. At today's session of the Security Council, noted Ivanov, several concrete moves of Russia were considered that could change the course of the events. Moscow continues to ascribe to a political solution of the crisis, but states that only the goodwill of Russia is not sufficient. According to Ivanov, adequate reactions and concrete steps are necessary. Ivanov notified about this Strobe Talbot, Deputy Secretary of State of the U.S., expressing hope that Russia and U.S. will find a common ground as to the future moves in order to stop the further tragic development in Kosovo and redirect it towards political solution. Talbot said that the discussion will continue and that they're considering the potential role of UN in re-establishing peace. In Beijing, German Chancellor Schröder met with a categorical demand of China to stop the bombing as a prerequisite for a peaceful solution of the Kosovo crisis. The German Chancellor discussed with the Chinese President, the Prime Minister and the Foreign Affairs Minister another categorical position. Every political solution must have the consent of the sovereign state of Yugoslavia. China thus reiterated that no solution can be imposed on Yugoslavia. Only with cooperation with Yugoslavia can you seek a solution. Schröder will remain in Beijing only one day, although it had been originally planned for 4 days. Clearly the change is due to the bombardment. Beijing is not pleased with so far with the offered explanations, and they demand full investigation and establishment of the responsibility. World agencies also report that the chief of the Chinese Foreign Ministry said that this bombardment, beastly as it is, has caused huge civilian suffering and that NATO has to stop all of these actions. NATO has only worsened the consequences by use of force and disregard for the UN. They have definitely violated the UN Charter. China, as a permanent member of the UN Security Council, will not concede to this. China has declared a day of sorrow because of the death of the correspondent of Xinhua from Belgrade, the correspondent of Guanmin Jibao and his wife Ju Jin. The remnants of the 3 journalists killed in the NATO bombing last Friday in Belgrade arrived to Beijing with a special plane. At the main square of Supreme Peace and many buildings and institutions, flags are at half-mast. The Chinese delegation that visited Belgrade after the bombing was also joined by several injured Chinese people who arrived also today. The Vice President of China and member of the closest party circle, Hu Jintao, was at the airport, as well as many other high officials. Beijing and China expressed their respect to the casualties, but also their bitterness because of this, as they stress, barbaric attack of NATO and America. The commemorative meeting in the Xinhua agency was attended by the highest government and party officials, headed by President Jiang Zemin. The leading paper, Zhenmin Zhibao, calls upon all freedom-loving countries of the world to work together on the defense of the world peace and to stop this brutal violation of sovereignty of a country. Zheng Minjibao also calls this attack on the Chinese embassy a violation of the Chinese sovereignty and a serious danger for world peace and stability. This kind of explanation that this is a mistake will never be accepted by China, states the leading Chinese paper. The president of Russia, Boris Yeltsin, dismissed today the Prime Minister Yevgeny Primakov and the entire government and appointed to that function the Minister of Internal Affairs, Sergei Stepashin. In his televised address to the nation, President Yeltsin stated that the government was not fully capable of carrying out all of the tasks assigned to it and thus lead to results that could stabilize the economy of the country. President Yeltsin said that we cannot wait for further decisions because we cannot postpone any decisions until any new elections. He announced this decision to Yevgeny Primakov at a meeting at Kremlin, although people had been speaking already about the possible change of the Prime Minister, especially after many attempts to put Primakov and Igor Ivanov to a lower profile regarding further regulation of the Kosovo crisis. President Yeltsin also publicly showed that he doesn't like the method of work of Primakov, who showed too much of an independence and stressed the professional qualifications of the cabinet ministers. Prime Minister Primakov stated that his government has no reasons to be embarrassed of anything because within few months they managed to accomplish several important tasks, thus influences the economic stability of the country, reducing the inflation, and also showed that Russia can count on its own sources and resources in many respects. The new candidate for Prime Minister, Stepashin, who has spent his entire work age in police forces, was supported by Primakov, who said that he should continue with the realization of economic measures. As to Stepashin, doctor of law and history, Yeltsin's own man, who declares that he came with him and will live with him, Duma will decide already next week. Meanwhile, the decision of Yeltsin was a total surprise here for the public and has already caused divided opinions and chaos in the stock market. Values of Russian shares are falling just as the exchange rate of the ruble to the dollar. In a sign of protest, the deputy to the presidential administration, Oleg Sismir, submitted resignation. President of Duma Seleznyov called this decision a most grave mistake. Duma is clearly divided. So-called left parties are in deep protest, while the Federal Democratic Party believes that this decision is in the interest of the stability of the Russian economy. State Duma accused today the resolution of the leading TV companies for a pro-NATO reporting on the crisis in Yugoslavia. They said that especially over the last few days, many of the Russian media have clearly shown that they serve as instruments of NATO for its propaganda. They have suggested to the president to limit the freedom of the TV companies as well as the access to the foreign media because they only support NATO actions and thus even have repercussions for the security of Russia. The Association of Journalists of Russia demanded an immediate end of the bombardment. In their resolution, the